Well, welcome to this very special podcast, episode number 100 for the Aviation Insurance Podcast. So today we want to do something special and celebrate all that has happened over the last and first 100 episodes of the Aviation Insurance Podcast. Just for your information, for those of you new to this show, the Aviation Insurance Podcast aired its first episode on July 5th, 2021 as a spin-off to a podcast we started with called the Aviation Business Podcast. And so in this 3.5 years, I guess it has been, or so just about, we've recorded 100 episodes, beginning with just the individual episodes with me introducing people to general aviation insurance concepts, moving into interviews with high-level aviation insurance company leaders, other aviation insurance leaders, industry leaders such as Ed Bolen, CEO of the NBAA. Bruce Landsberg was the vice chair of the NTSB. To Andrew Moore, the CEO of the National Agricultural Aviation Association, and other industry leaders like the heads of U.S. companies, Jeff Bruno at Global Aerospace, John Brogan at USAIG, and others that are coming. So we just wanted to take a few minutes and highlight some of these great moments from our episodes, starting from our early episodes teaching people about the concept of aviation insurance to a few highlights as we celebrate today's 100th episode. Thank you so much for being a listener. I would just like to also thank my team, especially those today, Jolena, Nick, and Keen, who spent so much time helping to produce this content. I couldn't do this without my team, and I give them all the credit. I just sit here and record, from them scheduling it to making sure all the technology requirements are met and communications are done, and that this is produced and posted in all the ways that you get it. So I want to thank them. This wouldn't happen without them. And certainly I want to thank you, listener. Some of you I know, others of you I don't. And just want to thank you for being a part of this 100th episode of the Aviation Insurance Podcast. So let's go to some of our highlights right now.
Well, welcome everybody to the very first episode of the Aviation Insurance Podcast. For episode 1, we're just going to start with some basics of why is aviation insurance or aircraft insurance unique. Aircraft are powered by vastly different propulsion methods, right? We have, piston aircraft, multi-engine piston aircraft with varying horsepower. We have different numbers of seats, handling characteristics. And so insurance companies really want to have a say in who is piloting the aircraft. So it takes underwriters and insurance companies who have an understanding and a specialization and understanding who and what would have the best odds for safely handling and operating an aircraft. So they want to say in that.
Simulation, near and dear to my heart, has improved tremendously, particularly at the bottom end, because of the tremendous improvement in computers in general. And I think we should be doing a lot more simulation, particularly in primary flight training. The companies and pilots at the top end have been using it for decades, and they realize the benefit. The one area that hasn't got enough attention and really needs to get a lot more is in flight data monitoring. And that's something where we have the aircraft instrumented and we know precisely what the aircraft is doing both before and after the crash. Now, some would say that's very self-serving for the NTSB because it makes our job very, very easy to figure out the what happened and why it happened. And in most cases, we already know how it can be prevented once we have the what and the why. But in light airplanes, this is something new, and I think it has the potential for drastically changing our safety record, because it certainly did with the airlines.
More standard curriculum will not only help all Part 135 operators, but will inevitably enhance Part 91 operations as well. We're also very focused on scenario-based training. So it's not kind of rote memory, but actually scenario-based. And so I think it's a multitude of things, Tim, but certainly technologies and training coming together are how we really work to advance the safety of the system. I think another thing is using the data to really advance what we know. And that's part of the standardized training curriculum, but it's also part of the programs. FOQA is really important because it helps us see trends that allow us to have interventions before they become accidents. So FOQA has always been a huge FOQA, by the way, flight ops quality assurance. So that type of data is really important. And we're seeing really relatively inexpensive programs like Cloud Ahoy that are allowing people to see in real time, are they doing stable approaches? Do they have a good descent rate? Are they hitting the touchdown zones? And what we found is this kind of real-time information data is providing usable feedback. So it's a combination, technology, data, training, putting it all together to make sure that at every flight, we're bringing our A game, we're leveraging every opportunity we have and being able to fly safely.
We talked about some of the exciting things. So we return back to that and some of the technologies that are coming on, and in conversations I've had with other industry leaders, we keep talking about those technologies. So how do you foresee some of those latest technologies like flight data monitoring or telematics is a formal term, changing how aircraft insurance policies or aviation insurance policies are underwritten in the future?
Well, my answer might surprise you, but I think telematics is a bit overblown. While it might more precisely measure exposure in terms of things like hours flown and currency, it won't necessarily predict accidents or fully guide your underwriting. I think where things like this come into play, if you use it this way, is in loss prevention. Things like FOQA, or Flight Ops Quality Assurance, which essentially is a form of telematics when aggregated with larger groups of data, so you have a benchmark to measure you or your pilots against, can pretty dramatically improve. Airlines have benefited from this for years, and we're just seeing this trickle down into GA. Large data providers, for example, like GE, are aggregating data, and they're feeding it back to customers who are taking this data to training entities like flight safety, who can then train anomalies and trends that fall outside of the mean for flight department crews. That's a very exciting development.
As it relates to safety itself, what do you think is the one thing that will have the biggest impact on the safety of the industry?
One is the continuous education and safety programs, the continuous participation in education and safety. We see through our education programs, primarily our professional aerial application support system pass that we take to the States every year with new curriculum, original curriculum on drift mitigation and aviation safety. It markedly reduces, one, the number of drift incidences, and two, the accident rate. Whether that's the actual accident rate total, and even sadly, as you know, we have fatal accidents, and the fatal accident rate is reduced as well. So continuing with our educational programs, we truly believe that the more people that join in to that program, the fewer accidents we'll have, and the more targeted our applications will be.
I would put absolutely at the top of the list is flight data monitoring. It changed the airline industry. The airline industry loss record has greatly improved, and the one clear big thing that's changed there over the years has been flight data monitoring. It's the value of it cannot be underestimated. The history of aviation incidents and accidents has always been, that we have flying machines, people flying them, there's a crash, there's an incident, we investigate it, we figure out what went wrong, and then we engineer the man or the machine, whichever failed, we figure out, okay, what went wrong, maybe it's one, maybe it's both, and then we engineer it. We train the pilot better to not do what that pilot did, or we change the machine, re-engineer the machine to do something so it doesn't do that again. With flight data monitoring, we now have all of this data to look at, so we can do accident investigations without accidents. We can look at that data, we can pick it apart, we can pick things to say, hey, if we land too fast at this airport, let's analyze those, let's look at it, and let's train the pilots, let's engineer the machines before the loss happens. So
what is a non-standard aviation insurance risk?
So from our perspective, a non-standard risk is basically anything that my competitors don't want to insure. And we typically put them into one of four categories. The first category, and probably the most popular for us, is the transitioning pilot. So when a pilot goes from a Cessna 172 into a King Air, that can be a tough type of a risk to insure. Obviously, there's training and there's mentor time involved. We've done very well in this area only because we're going to ask for higher deductibles. We're obviously going to charge more money, and we're going to look for a very solid training program. Typically, we'll write that account for a year or two, and then once that pilot gets to the point where he's more palatable to our competitors, and they will turn around and write the risk. And that's fine. That type of scenario is built into our business model. The second category would be older pilots. By and large, the market looks at a pilot age 70 to 75 as being too old to fly by themselves. So very often we see those accounts being non-renewed or with restrictions for the pilot, such as dual only.
Moving kind of into past what we're excited about, I always like to ask what people are concerned about, with the industry and with someone in your position and with claims, you want to what also is impacting claims. And so, I anticipate those two go hand in hand about your biggest concerns about the industry and the biggest factors affecting claims today. And so I'm assuming those go together. What would that be for you?
Yeah, Tim, what concerns the general aviation industry, goes downstream to aviation insurers and typically, to claims as well. So, I think top factors and concerns in the industry, first of all, are things like the labor shortage. Okay. And by that, I mean, in typically critical positions, whether it's air traffic control, pilots, mechanics, engineers, and you kind of whistling past the graveyard because eventually you have people with less experience in critical positions, and it naturally leads to bad stuff, claims. Related to the labor shortage, of course, and I think the industry is doing things to try and improve that, but we're still in that kind of state of the market.
Well, it was so exciting to see some of those early moments and some of the great interviews that we've been able to experience here on the podcast. I'm truly blessed to be a part of all that is happening in this industry and to be in this situation where I can bring this great content to you, our great audience, our great listeners, our great watchers, if you're on YouTube or our other channels. And so we're thankful for each of you, and we look forward to the next 100. We want to continue to bring great content to you, to bring value to you and your organization. And, always feel free to reach out to my team at arisinsurance.com, at info@arisinsurance.com. If you have ideas or subjects you'd like for us to discuss, we'd love to hear them and see if it's a good fit for this show. Well, as we conclude 100 episodes, thank you again. Join us again next time as we continue navigating the waypoints in aviation insurance. You'd think I'd get this right after 100 episodes. Join us again next time. Join us again next time.
Join us again next time. Join us again next time.
Join us again next time. And until then, enjoy clear skies and unlimited visibility.